pink ball, cute beyond belief, mean as hell in certain regions, and an icon of simplistic character design, Kirby is one of the most requested characters I've ever been asked to analyse, and it's not a design I would have expected, to be honest. I'd imagine at a first click some of you are even thinking to yourself, right now, Kirby? The pink balloon from Smash Brothers? That character hasn't even changed once, you absolute moron. And to that I'd say, hush your gums. While I've never been an avid player of the Kirby franchise, there is obviously a key strength to this character that has resonated with audiences. For nearly 3 decades, Kirby has been a Nintendo mainstay, with releases across every system. With a simplistic look that can easily be altered, Kirby has become a chameleon of sorts for gameplay styles, whether he's platforming, functioning as a pinball, playing a round of golf, or smashing someone's face in. And his form factor and expressions don't allow him to ever look out of place doing it. Though his design hasn't steered too far from its original depiction, there is a clear difference in Kirby over his different eras. Though there are so many slight alterations in this design that I'm throwing up a white flag early. I can't analyse all of them in specific detail, but I have taken a look at a lot of Kirby designs and picked out the ones that I think are most memorable in terms of quality and uniqueness, as well as exploring his natural evolution. This also isn't a best Kirby hat video. The video would truly never end if I listed each of these power-ups. I speak slow enough as it is. But if that's a video you'd like to see, just vote in the top right and let me know which power-ups you like most in the comments. I'm the artist Mark Flynn, and let's find out which Kirby design I think truly is best. Please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel and click that notification bell if you'd like to help this channel grow. Let's hit that 20,000 subscriber goal sooner rather than later. Kirby's original design is an interesting one, as the character was born out of a lot of indecisions. His first game, Kirby's Dream Land, debuted on the Nintendo Game Boy in 1992, but before that it wasn't a Kirby game at all. During development, Kirby was actually a placeholder, a generic dummy character that would be used for testing, until theoretically a more interesting lead character would be developed. In 2012, original concepts of the character emerged in Kirby's Dream Collection's Celebration book. Here Kirby was known as Po, great name, and would have been the titular character leading the Twinkle Po franchise. His initial design was established here with a round body, little rounded arms and rounded feet. Perhaps the most interesting initial detail surrounding this design was the difference in colour schemes between regions. In Japan, pink was decided upon with red shoes, though Shigeru Miyamoto had been keen to use yellow. In the US and Europe, Kirby appeared completely white, so he would match up with the lack of colour on the original Game Boy. I think this design looks fantastic, but I've got to laugh at the really odd commitment to making this character look exactly how he did on a monochrome device. Speaking of the Game Boy, on the LCD screen itself, Kirby was an adorable block of pixels, with a simplistic animation style that suited his simplistic character design. Most of his form could be seen here, with a little dot of a pixel in place for his mouth. In future games such as Kirby's Adventure on the NES and Kirby's Dream Land 2, he would retain this sprite work, though on the systems with colour he would be a full shade of pink rather than a colourless blob. Speaking of these future games, this is where first alterations to the character would begin to form. 1993's Kirby's Adventure again featured different Kirby box art dependent on region, which showed off a slightly amended design for each. In Japan, the character's true appearance was built upon. Kirby again was a simplistic pink and red character, but this shading was removed in favour of an even more simplistic two-tone colour palette with a neon shade of pink. As far as details, this design now featured a new expression for Kirby, which we would see a lot over the years. His arms are almost fin-like, with rounded shoe-like feet. Those features were also present in the international version this time around. There's a striking resemblance to the original look from Dreamland, but it's like traits of the Japanese Kirby have been blended in. The character looks similar and is still white, but the darker shadows around him now incorporate pink. He's on brand with the red shoes though, at least I think they're shoes. Who knows? A hint of blue in the details of Kirby's eyes is just about visible now, which would also factor into the character's development. Kirby's Dream Land 2 would follow up this design in 1995 as the first game to feature the same Kirby artwork in both Japan and the rest of the world. This feels like a logical step forward and a more detailed version of the previous Japanese looking adventure. Speaking of adventure, some of the artwork from that game also carries over into the game's instruction manual. While this Kirby is somewhat similar to previous iterations, there's a subtle change to the markings on his cheeks. These are now 3 smaller coloured lines rather than the 2 black outlines that were present before. This artwork also uses a lighter outline around the edge of Kirby that I think adds emphasis on the character and makes Kirby stand out as the main feature of the game's beautiful box art. Beginning in 1996 with Kirby Superstar and leading into Dreamland 3 in 1997, the Super Nintendo presented Kirby with two distinctively different design types. Superstar featured a much more detailed sprite than before, which put previous games to shame. This 16-bit Kirby was shiny and sleek with a bolder colour palette and larger eyes. As for Dreamland 3, the game's Kirby sprite featured a storybook style aesthetic with similar proportions to the original Game Boy titles. The vibrant colour palette from Superstar was toned down in favour of a calmer, pastel colour set. In this day and age, I prefer the latter as it's a lot easier on the eyes. The artwork for both of the games was quite similar to what had been presented before, but Dreamland 3 stands out to me. The artwork on its box retained a similar look and feel to Dreamland 2, but feels, how can I say it, higher production value. Key differences to Kirby include slight blue eye details, a thinner line art style, a more vibrant colour of pink, and his arms feel less fin-like and more blob-like. Dreamland 3 easily has one of the best looks for Kirby, both on the box and in the game as far as I'm concerned. As we entered the millennium, pixel-based graphics were falling out of style, and in their place was the rise of the 3D polygon. Even Kirby wasn't safe from this trend, and his smooth, round aesthetic would become a little bit sharper. Kirby 64 The Crystal Shards launched in 2000, and the artwork on the box was a nice logical evolution for Kirby. While looking similar to before, he now had bigger eyes with a much more noticeable gradient of blue to them. He also featured new pink ovals on his cheeks, as opposed to the scruffy lines we've seen previously. The biggest change artistically is that for the first time the character is a 3D render. He's no longer a cartoon or hand-drawn bit of artwork and doesn't feature any outlines. This puts more emphasis on the shading of the character so that limbs and other details are visible. Due to this change, his palette has altered ever so slightly. His mouth is now depicted black as opposed to red so that it would actually stand out. In the game itself, Kirby is a big blocky boy. He does appear very similar to how he looks in the game art, but without any level of depth. I'm not a technical whiz, but I expect this is likely a similar texture or layer that is copy and pasted onto the simple game model WWF No Mercy style, the wonders of the N64. This iteration looks very simple, as all the character really is a mashup of a few very simple 3D shapes. In this form, Kirby's model is unfortunately a bit sharper around the edges, and some of his power-ups by association look quite terrifying. This, for example, looks like a trap from Saw. While Kirby's design altered slightly with the crystal shards, his appearance remained largely similar to the SNES in Smash Bros. 64, much like other characters such as Samus. His artwork resembled Dreamland 3's with a little bit more texture and shine. While these were notable attempts at translating Kirby to 3D, I think game-wise at least they are probably the worst appearances of the character, as this style of graphics simply makes him look like a rounded brick rather than a cuddly ball of joy. The artwork nevertheless was a nice jump towards the modern look that we know so well. An animated series would soon follow for Kirby, with Kirby Right Back At Ya launching in 2001. I have some fond YouTube poop memories of this one.
How can I help you, King DDD?
I need a monster to claw with that there Kirby!
That's what we do best at DDD.
Using a mixture of 2D and 3D animation, this Kirby again looked relatively similar to his previous iteration, maintaining many of the design details that were present on the N64. However, there was a big change to his aesthetic once again. There's a distinct cell shading effect used on this version of Kirby to make him maintain a cartoon-like appearance at all times, and as a result of this, he used less bold and much calmer colours, with darker pinks used specifically for shading. His eyes are made slightly longer and narrower, much like his feet. It's not a bad design, but also doesn't stand out as one of the top ones for me. I always find that 3D models attempting to look 2D are a bit unsettling in comparison with traditional 2D artwork, but each to their own. I was always a cartoon kid growing up, and am clearly bitter and jaded by CG. Luckily for me, the next set of games would return to the previous 2D art styles I am ever so fond of. Kirby's initial foray into games on the Game Boy Advance would come in the form of 2002's Nightmare in Dreamland, a remake of the original Dreamland, and 2004's Kirby and the Amazing Mirror. The artwork across both of these games feels very similar in style to the previous Dreamland designs on the Game Boy and SNES. Thick line art and similar shading is used alongside the larger eyes that had begun to come into the fray with the N64 games and TV series. Amazing Mirror also saw Kirby split into 4, which changed up his base design somewhat, but only in regards to colour swaps. Pink was still the clear winner. The pixel art in both of these games, I've gotta say, is simply beautiful, with the same sprite being present in both games. The 32-bit capabilities of the handheld make Kirby much more appealing than he had been on the Super Nintendo. His colour palette was more advanced than ever before, and he found himself with an in-game appearance that complemented his look in the game's artwork very well, with similar shading, colours and features. The biggest strength of these designs for me is just how fluid they look in motion. It's a real indicator of how well the design can work in a 2D environment. Can we have a modern game that uses this design philosophy? Please? It's a good time to mention around this period that Kirby games continued to have differences in box art between regions. While Kirby had established a matching design internationally by this point and his colour remained universal, his expressions would now differ depending on which continent you bought his games on. Shinya Kumazaki mentioned this in an interview with GameSpot. The most powerful image of Kirby is that cute image. We think that's the one that appeals to the widest audience. While it does start cute, we know there is a serious side to Kirby as well. What we have heard is that strong, tough Kirby that's really battling hard is a more appealing sign of Kirby in North America, so that's what we feature in the US. One of the games that featured this difference in expressions was Kirby's Air Ride, which launched for the GameCube in 2004. This racing game spin-off featured the cleanest look for Kirby yet, and outside of Super Smash Bros. Melee was one of his most advanced looks graphically. Not much had really changed about the design yet again, but it stands out for me as a much better translation of the character to 3D, whilst retaining the charm of 2D titles that the N64 struggled to capture. Future titles on the Nintendo DS handheld wouldn't stray too far, as is to be expected with the character by this point. At this stage of script writing, my brain is actually about to explode, trying to make note of every minor difference. Why couldn't we get a crazy live action Kirby or something? Squeak Squad was another platforming game that launched in 2006 with sprite work that didn't look all that different from the previous games on the GBA. The game's artwork was similar to these games too, but opted for a cleaner and slightly simpler design. I'm not a massive fan of the change here, as I don't think thin line art lends itself well to Kirby. Something about it just makes him look like a bit of a knockoff when stood with the other designs. Maybe I've just stared at too many pink blobs by this point. Did anyone like this one? Funnily enough, the next game on the handheld was Superstar Ultra, a 2008 remake of the original Superstar on the SNES, and it's as if they knew exactly what I hated about the previous game. While this Kirby isn't that different, he features very bold and thick line art, and in places even has a little bit of a shine to him. It's probably just coincidence, but I like to think of this as a nice little throwback to the shininess of the sprite in the original game. Now it's time for drastic differences. Finally! Kirby's Epic Yarn released in 2010 for the Nintendo Wii with an adorable, cutesy aesthetic. At its most basic design form, Kirby is very similar to how he's appeared previously. The structure, features and proportions are in line with recent appearances of the character. However, as this game's name implied, this craft-based Kirby was made entirely of yarn, and in doing so was constructed entirely of line art. It's a beautifully simplistic and creative design, but I don't think it's the best. The gimmick was memorable and adorable, but ultimately didn't even become a Kirby staple, transitioning over to Yoshi for the foreseeable future. You can call this Woolly World all you like, but it's definitely Yarn Yoshi. Following up the yarn gimmick was 2011's Kirby's Mass Attack, a game that was made with the idea of Kirby being split into 10 separate, and you've guessed it, adorable beings that would storm through levels like a Spartan warrior elite. Absolutely terrifying. To match this concept, the artwork presented multiple Kirbys with smaller proportions. For example, the feet and arms were tiny in comparison with other features such as Kirby's eyes, which were significantly larger. This would also apply to the in-game sprite work itself, as Kirby's multiple faces had clearer, larger expressions so that they could be seen amongst this disorganised pile of podge. When taking a closer look at this Kirby, you can make out a craftwork paper style texture. The thick outline is purple this time around, and there's a hint of purple that hangs over the design in its entirety. Kirby's skin looks to be a purplish pink, and his shoes/feet, whatever they are, also now have a hue of purple too. This is easily the cutest design as far as I'm concerned, and this is hammered in by the fact that this Kirby literally has cute star shapes in his eyes. I'm not sure how many times I've said cute and adorable in this video, but let's just keep saying it. Cute, adorable, cute, adorable, cute, adorable. Special points to anyone who counts these for the comments section. You get nothing. Earlier in this list, I didn't mention 2005's Kirby Canvas Curse, as the touchscreen based game for the DS never really added much to the Kirby design we knew and loved. Rather than add, it took away, leaving us with a circular Kirby without the limbs, who rolled through levels in the form of a ball. A similar design I really want to mention though is the amazingly put together Kirby from 10 years later in Kirby and the Rainbow Curse for the Wii U. Making similar use of the gamepad's touchscreen in a stylus based gameplay style, this Kirby stands out massively from the rest of the designs due to the incredible stop motion, clay and plasticine aesthetic that the game presents us with. When forced into his ball form, Kirby's rounded form is complemented by huge adorable eyes with depth and cheeks that protrude from his squishy material. He looks like he came straight out of a Play-Doh set, and outside of Epic Yarn is probably the most unique Kirby in this video. I really wish they'd use this aesthetic in a traditional Kirby platformer too. As a character that has explored a ton of different art styles, this is easily the best Kirby experiment for me. Kirby Star Allies is the most recent mainline Kirby game, and it features a design that is very similar to a huge amount of Kirby games that have taken place prior, albeit with minor differences. This look was first established in 2011's Kirby's Return to Dreamland, and it marked a significant change for the character in platform games. Yet again, the character was a 3D render, but this time around he was much slicker and his colour palette would closer resemble the neon pink from Superstar, ever so slightly. A similar look was used in Triple Deluxe in 2014, but with different titles and different systems, there would be features like bigger eyes compensating for a smaller screen. Dream Collection would also use a very similar render. I really struggled to find differences in the recent Kirby games, so I will await any abuse in the comments if I've missed anything in particular from this era. I definitely expect this. The render for Star Allies itself stands out as one of the strongest Kirby designs. The space-age galaxies that can be found within his eyes are a nice subtle touch that makes this iteration stand out and is a nice reference to the game's title. Now, of course, I haven't mentioned all of the Kirby titles, but amidst the endless amount of spin-offs and games, I'd be a bit of a fool to not mention at least one more of the Smash Bros. Titles, even though Nintendo didn't think Kirby changed that much between entries. Their gags, not mine. Kirby had a big role in Smash Bros. Ultimate, Sakurai Bias, am I right? So it feels important to include this design here. I'll focus on this one as I think it stands out from the pack as a definitive version of the character in the fighting game franchise. Looking very similar to the render from recent games in the series, this is essentially modern Kirby with a lighter colour palette. It doesn't really add anything new to the design other than that, but damn does it look good in HD. The Smash Bros. Series is interesting in the sense that you get to see Kirby's height up against other Nintendo mainstays, and it makes you realise he is a bit of a unit too. It's a hard choice to pick a best Kirby, as the character really has retained such a consistent look, but in looking through these games in particular, I'm going to use three main criteria: cuteness, colour and style. With series like Zelda, I have expressed such enthusiasm for 3D toon-like graphics. However, with Kirby, I think that his best designs exist in a 2D cartoon sphere, as opposed to a literal 3D sphere. Do you get it? Because he's round. I'm here all week. With that in mind, I'm picking the Kirby from the Game Boy Advance era as my best Kirby design. The original Kirby was designed so well that it really didn't need much tweaking, but the improvements were clear in the SNES era and abundant when the character had hit the GBA. The light outline is one of my favourite additions to the cartoon style, which really makes the character pop, along with the thick line art and big cute eyes. It also maintains my favourite colour palette for the character, as I'm less of a fan of the neon pinks that are present in some of the other titles. The design is completed with amazing pixel art that is full of character and highlights Kirby perfectly whilst he looks cute as. Well, there we are. What do you think? Do you agree with me? And are there any designs that you think I should have mentioned? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to check out some of my other design videos whilst you're here. A big thank you to Victor Tamaj, sorry if that is pronounced incorrectly. You were a really big help generating research for this video, it's much appreciated. At this time, I'd like to thank my patrons who help make videos like this possible, with a special shout out to Top Hat Gaming Man and Douglas Quaid, who are donating at the top tier of donations. If you'd like to be featured in the credits, just head on over to Patreon, you'd really be helping me out.